Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Executive Director of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, Doug Berkey.
Thank you very much. At the end of the Cold War, the U.S. was clearly the dominant technological leader when it came to air power. F-117s dropping precision-guided munitions over Baghdad marked that more than anything else. Yet 3 decades later, this edge has really eroded. And when we consider the return of great power competition and other drivers, it's very important that the Air Force regain its global lead in this regard. And so really following on Dr. Roper's remarks, I'm very honored to have our panelists here today because they're really the leaders that are going to make a lot of this happen. And so first we have General Wilson, Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, Major General Cooley, Commander of Air Force Research Laboratory, Jeff Babione, who's the Vice President and General Manager of Skunk Works at Lockheed Martin, Kevin Mickey, Sector Vice President and General Manager of Military Aircraft Systems at Northrop Grumman. And finally, but not last, Steve Parker, Vice President and TX Program Manager at Boeing. So, just kicking this off, if we could turn to the Vice Chief. Sir, if you could really give us context, explain why we've got a problem statement here and your big thoughts on the broader elements of it here.
Well, I think the Chief and Secretary have done a really good job of kind of framing the most important part, and that's the why. If we look at the National Defense Strategy and we look at the National Security Strategy, it talks about this return to great power competition. And we look at what our adversaries have done and how they've modernized, how they have mega projects, how they've studied us for 28 years, and how we're back in this great power competition. Couple that with what's also going on, that the Air Force we need. We think we're too small for what our nation's asking us to do. And as we've talked about, 386 Squadron is what we need to grow to, and it's about a 25% increase in growth for our Air Force. So the why is this great power competition. The what, I think, is really, when you get down to it, it's a mindset shift. It's this sense of urgency that we can't rest on our laurels. And we have to take out of our vocabulary the word can't and replace it with can. And we can do this. And we look back at a time in our history, this July we'll celebrate the 50th anniversary of men landing on the moon. So on May 25th, 1961, President John F. Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon and back. And between May 25th, 1961 and July 1969, a little over 8 years, we had 36 space launches. We went through the Mercury, the Gemini, and the Apollo programs. Right, we had some spectacular failures. But as a nation, we came together and we said, we're going to do this. And we did remarkable things. We built the biggest facilities that had ever been built, the biggest rockets that had ever been built. We put on the Apollo 11, 3 people left, 2 of them were airmen. And one of those airmen, Buzz Aldrin, made a giant step for mankind. And that happened 50 years ago. So we know how to do this, right? And that's the what. The who is you, right? Ordinary people who could see that they could make a difference, that they could help propel our nation forward, did it 50 years ago, and they're the ones who are going to do it today. Right? We look around, the chief and the secretary, and what their whole focus is on empowering and unchaining the most important weapon system in the United States Air Force, our people. With these amazing ideas, with this culture that we live in a free society, and they're not centrally delegated down on what they have to do. They come up with new, innovative, creative ways to do things that we've never thought possible, and not only new ways, but we haven't even, we meet them every day. Who would have thought of that? Well, it was some airman that came up with this idea, and we think we can do that. So that's how I've been trying to frame the problem, was to start with the why, this great power competition. The what is to get back to this culture and mindset of can, not can't, and the who is you. And I'm looking for a room of amazing airmen that I know can help move our Air Force into this 21st century digital age that we have to move into.
Sir, I've got one more for you. We obviously went fast after 9/11. If you look at programs like MRAP, if you look at RPAs, it was very impressive. and yet those were against two largely failed states and insurgents and all of that. So when you look at going against great powers, what is different about going fast? How do we have to optimize ourselves in a different fashion?
Yeah, we're not going to win in the 21st century warfare with industrial age thinking or processes. And so from the chief and the secretary and Dr. Roper, you've heard of what we have to do different of this whole capabilities development life cycle. So from requirements, from acquisition, from contracting to testing, the whole production line of how we put that together, we have to think differently. Congress has been very helpful. We got some new authorities, whether the 804 authorities, the decision-making that's been delegated down to us, the Secretary talked about this morning. We cannot expect to win if we line that up linearly and follow the old model that worked, right? And not against anybody who went before us. They didn't have the challenges we have today. They didn't have the peer competitors that are innovating on the speed and cycle that they are. So we have to be able to outthink and outcompete them. And we can't let the bureaucracy get in our way to do that. We certainly have to partner with our industry partners. We've got to be able to reach out across academia and all the bright minds across the country with the ideas. And then we've got to be able to partner and strip out the regulations that are hindering us across all those areas, from the requirements piece on the front end to the acquisition piece to how we do both operational testing and developmental testing, how we compress that, how do we get the budgeting and contracting piece in there, all built around an operator with the speed of relevance and the mindset that says, look, delivering capability 10 years late that's irrelevant we just can't do that. So we've got to change that whole mindset piece.
General Cooley, at Right Pat, you're the one actually charged with making a lot of this happen, where the rubber meets the road. When you look at evolving AFRL's mission and really honing it for this new era in which we live, how do you see everything changing from your basic S&T practices to human capital management and the kind of people you want to recruit and retain and all of that? Can you please describe that?
Well, that's a big question and covers just about everything. But let me start as the Vice Chief did at the National Defense Strategy. But I'm going to talk about the lines of effort in the National Defense Strategy because it's really what has helped us frame what we're doing and how we're going to move forward. First line of effort was about lethality. And Dr. Roper kind of hit on some of these key ideas about what are the types of systems that we can bring to bear that are going to cause multiple dilemmas and cause our potential adversaries to start thinking differently, that maybe the capability that they're planning to defend themselves against is not really where we're going. There's other options and there's other capabilities that's going to really confound and bring complexity. So the Secretary talked this morning about the strategy, gave a peek under the hood of what's coming out with respect to the science and technology strategy. It's, as she said, it's getting very close to go ahead and unveil. I'm very excited about that. But those main capabilities, those strategic capabilities are what we are driving towards to get at. But that's really all about lethality. The other two lines of effort within the National Defense Strategy are business systems. And let me talk a little bit about doing business faster. Dr. Roper's talked about that, but down at the where the rubber meets the road within the laboratory ecosystem, the expanse of other transaction authorities. So other contracting mechanisms besides BAAs and SBIRs and a whole variety, RFPs. There are ways in which we can partner and go much faster. I apologize. That's for many in the audience. We're probably saying, okay, this is acquisition alphabet soup. But the point is, there are different mechanisms that will allow us to go faster. Also in the way that we execute competitions to contract with industry. So the business processes are all under review in terms of how can we go faster. The last line of effort in the National Defense Strategy is partnerships. And the Vice Chief kind of mentioned this, but this is a big deal for us. In fact, one of the stories I often tell goes back to about a year and a half ago. I think I got a note from the Vice Chief that said China had just announced that they were investing $10 billion in a quantum institute. What are you doing, Bill? And I said, okay, well, I can get my homework assignment, go see what we got. Well, I came back with the answer, and at the time, we were investing about $10 million in quantum-related technologies. But I said, that's not really the right question. The question is not what is the nation state of China doing relative to a single defense laboratory, but what is the nation state of China doing relative to the United States as a nation state? And as everybody knows, there's a lot of activities in the Department of Energy with our sister service labs, and then we can also reach across the ocean to our allies. And so since that time, that was about 18 months ago, we have engaged all of those entities to build up the team to advance this technology and compete. Now, the interesting challenge that we have is our system is not set up as a top-down or centralized control for all of these investments, but rather it's distributed, it's competitive, and it's messy, but we get a lot of energy and dynamism out of that. So how can we harness that? And so we're in the process of doing exactly that, to try and bring to bear the nation, to act more like a nation state in these key technology areas, and making some good progress and bringing our allies along with us.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. So Jeff, if you look at Skunk Works and the products and the history and the legacy of that team, I mean, you know, P-80, U-2, SR-71, F-117, incredible, some of the most shining examples of accomplishment for the industrial age. And yet, really talking about what Dr. Roper hit upon when we were in the information age, today you have outer mold lines that could be on flight lines for quite some time, and yet the guts, the software and the electronics and all that, it evolves quite a bit over an aircraft service life. How does that change how you go about aircraft design today and the challenges as you envision them now?
Well, thanks, Doug. It's had a profound impact on how we design and develop technology. Steve and Kevin realize as our customer changes, we as an industry have to change to react. And so for at least the last 10 years, Lockheed Martin, and I know many of the Northrop Grumman products, have moved to an open mission software, open radio architecture, utilizing the UCI interface that will enable us going forward to upgrade our platforms, your platforms, as quickly as possible. Just last year, we put one of our systems on a U2, and in the span of 3 weeks, we integrated, tested, and demonstrated 3 different companies' EW systems. In just 3 weeks, that would have taken years in the old architecture. It's forcing us to design differently. Dr. Roper mentioned the digital thread, digital tapestry, something that's not new, but the way we're utilizing it and being able to connect it seamlessly from the very beginnings of the concept development all the way to how it would be used. I know all our companies are investing heavily in better technologies in what we call designing for, and just leave that out there. How do I design for cost? How do I design for performance? How do I design for lower sustainment costs? And I can ask those questions of the system if I've laid it out properly very early on, enabling us to do a better job of understanding what the real cost performance attributes of our systems will be. It's something that really is going to harness artificial intelligence and machine learning going forward, where I think we're really just starting to begin to really understand where that can go. And why I think that's a positive aspect of these new generations of airplanes, it has really caused, I think, a considerable challenge for not only industry, but generals I'd offer for your own workforce. It's knowledge continuity. We've all seen that chart that said in 1950 there were dozens of aircraft programs, and in the last 2 decades there's 2 or 3. And while we are giving these new engineers and scientists great tools to design and develop the next technology, you can't learn how to do this on the Xbox. And that's why I was so glad to hear Dr. Roper's comments about prototyping and demonstrating. We need to do more of that. We learn. I'm not a big fan of fail fast. We didn't give a Collier Trophy to the guy that failed first. What I think the intent here is learn fast. And we do that through those prototypes. We have great, innovative young men and women, but in order to get them where they need to be, they actually have to design and produce this hardware, run those tests that learning experience can't be replicated. So I'm excited to hear that, and the more that we can do that, that will help us bridge this technology, this learning gap that we have, given there's so few programs.
No, I appreciate that. Kevin, your last job, you're at Scaled Composites, now obviously in Northrop Grumman in a more industrial standard capacity. If you look at Scaled, I mean, whether it be the Voyager or Spaceship One, it's an organization that has really charted a path forward with rapid innovation and agility, and just incredible results there. And obviously Northrop Grumman has pressed the edge of the envelope in different ways. If you look at what the B-2 was at the end of the Cold War, or what the B-21 will be, Global Hawk, you name it, it's very impressive. How do you take elements that you saw at Scale that were very positive, bring them into a more corporate environment with broader Northrop Grumman, and are there elements where you see Northrop has some edges on an advantage with what they have?
Yeah, thank you. So it's an honor to be here representing the employees of Northrop Grumman and to be on stage, working so hard with my competitive mates, if you will, here to turn out hardware for the warfighter. Our portfolio in military aircraft systems consists of the B-2, the F-35, F-18, Joint Stars, and E-2D. It's a big portfolio. But I come from 25 years of experience at Scaled Composites, where I did see another side of how the industry can behave. And I've bet my career on the fact that we can be successful with the very message that Dr. Roper has talked about, because I saw it. I saw how it can work. And at Scaled Composites, the affordability, the agility, the willingness to move fast, that was a culture. It's not a program. We tend to think of things as programs and not a total behavior change, which is what we're going to have to be successful here. 10 years ago, I would have probably been a skeptic. 5 years ago, I was hearing it enough. I was hearing enough talk about how we needed to move faster and how we were going to partner with industry and with all of our DoD customers to, in fact, move faster. And now I'm seeing that. I'm seeing us gain that momentum. So what we have to do as leaders, we have to continue to build that culture internally so that our employees trust us. Our customers trust us from the top to the bottom. And what I mean by that trust is that when we ask them to lean forward, we ask them to move faster, they won't get it right every time. They won't get it right. You said fail early, fail often. We didn't use that term either. It was learn early, learn often. It was prototype instead of study. And we did that. In my career, at 25 years at Scaled, I was involved in 25 manned first flights of new airplanes. In the case of Firebird, we got a phone call on February 9th, 2009. February 9th of 2010, we flew that airplane for the first time. That was through the contracting phase. That was through the work with our partnership. That was through the reviews. We can indeed do this through a partnership where at all levels there's look me in the eye accountability, where we're looking at each other and we're saying, you're not responsible for the contract negotiation. You're not responsible for that requirement. You're responsible for hardware making its way out onto the ramp or out into the field with everything that it needs to bring men and women home safely. We can do it. I've seen it done.
Let me jump in, because we've done that. We've got a history of doing that. Go back to 1961, partners with industry. A major wrote a contract for an SR-71. 9 people got after it. From contract signing to first flight of an SR-71, 22 months. Right? That's mind-blowing. Look at the design of the SR-71. We didn't have supercomputers doing that. First hypersonic airplane, the SR-71. Titanium, it didn't even exist. We had to go get the ore from the Soviet Union. We had to make new machines that knew how to bend titanium. None of that had been done. 22 months from contract signing to first flight, right? So we got to get back to those roots and partner with our industry partners on how to do that.
Hey, General, I think a way you bridge that, it's trust, right? We had great trust between the teams that were trying to execute it. Small teams that trusted each other to do what's right, to achieve that ultimate goal, the alignment. And that's, I think, an area that we still need to grow. And we know we can do this. It's not that hard, but the bigger you get, the larger the scale, the more difficult that trust element can be.
Steve, question for you. If you follow Boeing's history on the TX program, obviously when you guys decided to go with clean sheet design, you had moved very fast, and you ended up winning. What were lessons that you took from that program that you can employ throughout the broader enterprise?
Well, thanks, Doug. First off, I tell you that the Air Force deserves a great deal of credit. So throughout the process of TX, the Air Force shared requirements, thinking with industry that weren't firm, that weren't final, but allowed industry, and in this case Boeing, to invest. So that level of transparency, I think, is a major factor in how we get capability out to the warfighter early. Industry will invest in research and development and technology to meet the need. So first and foremost, I think that's a huge thing which has been touched on today. The Secretary talked about speed matters. That allowed us to go fast. We went from final concept, firm concept, to flight in 3 years. We built the ground-based training system that trained our pilots. We built 2 production representative jets and flew with a maturity that we could collect flight test data and win the competition. That's what the Air Force allowed industry to do. We wouldn't have had the courage to invest to build a new purpose-built jet if we didn't have those requirements. The second thing I tell you is that on the TX program, and I was leading F-15 at the time, I was watching it very closely, the team was challenged over 3 years to break the norm by Boeing, to go after every bit of bureaucracy that exists in the organization with our partners Saab, every process, every bit of tribal knowledge, every bit of new technology. What could we do to break the cost curve? It was talked about today. How do we break the cost curve? Not just from an acquisition perspective, how do we develop a weapon system that will train our future fighter pilots and bomber pilots, be around into the next century, remain relevant, and get it done quickly, and take the sustainment cost out. And that's what we did. And I think what happened there was the team was, even with my accent, American ingenuity. There's nothing like it. And I think when we challenge a team, whether it's the airmen, the Air Force, industry, when we give our teams a challenge, we need you to do this in this time frame. To the Vice Chief's point before, the SR-71, we can do it. So we need to challenge the status quo together, and we will get the capabilities out and give our warriors the edge that they deserve.
I think we've all seen time and time again, if we as leaders get the bureaucracy out of people's way, the people will amaze us with what they'll accomplish. Get it into the hands of the designer, get it out to the factory floor, they'll blow you away with the performance, right?
Got a question from the audience here. When you look at human capital, what are the new kind of talents and strengths that you're trying to recruit and retain when you're pushing forward in this new era?
So I guess I'd like to comment on that. In terms of the workforce, I think it was Thomas Friedman just wrote a book recently where he said the workforce is kind of changing from a learn to work model where you go to school, you get your degree, you become a mechanical engineer, whatever, and then you go to work and you apply that, to a work to learn model in which things are moving so fast. We've got to be technologically agile. We've got to be able to learn. I've got to take a workforce who's very smart, very capable, STEM degreed, and say, let me teach you about quantum mechanics and how that might be applicable. And so one of the things that we're moving towards is building up those short course-like capabilities and certification types of things, working with the Air Force Institute of Technology in particular, but so we can get the skills and education of a workforce. And the workforce has got to be willing and able to adjust and adapt. That's a challenge in some areas, but that's where I see one of the significant shifts in the workforce moving. The other aspect of this is teamwork, is the social, it's just the, too often we've seen people who are really, really bright, but if you can't work in a team and bring to bear the various skill sets and the multidisciplinary capabilities, you're highly unlikely to be successful. And so most of the innovation and breakthroughs that we've seen are at the seams of technology. And in order to do that, you've got to be able to work with people who don't come from your tribe and reach across and be exploratory. And so those types of skills are really central to being innovative and inventive. And if I could just maybe pull that apart a little bit. The theme of this conference is innovation, which is great. We see innovation across the Air Force, which is a tremendous opportunity for us. But the other piece that I see, the special role of science and technology and sort of that STEM is the invention, is to bring the new physics, the new capabilities, the new phenomenology that we're discovering in labs across academia as we work with our industry partners and allies, is what are those new phenomenologies and new physics and new insights that we can bring to bear? And so it's both the innovation and invention that need to come together for that technological advantage.
Can I jump in on a cautionary tale though? Because Bill mentioned the word STEM 3 times, science, technology, engineering, and math. Today, one of our adversaries is producing 8x the number of STEM graduates that we are. 8x. Right? And they also live in a world, in a culture that doesn't believe in the same values, and they don't really care where they get the idea from. In fact, in many cases, they'll steal a good idea. So I could argue that Google is replicated by Babione, and Amazon, Alibaba, and Didi copied Uber. That it's irrelevant because they're used in a country today that's perfectly acceptable and okay, and then they'll modify it for what works for them. So I don't want to underestimate different countries. I don't want to overestimate them, but I will tell you they're producing 8 times the number of STEM graduates that we are. So that's why I go back to this sense of urgency, and that we, collectively, got to understand that's the competition that we have to compete with. And so the young talent that Bill's talking about, we have to be able to find it, we have to be able to attract it to us, and then we have to be able to retain it. And to do that, we've heard speakers today, General Wells talk about how do you bring passion to something? How do you inspire people to want to make a difference in the companies and organizations that we're all going to be part of? And that's our challenge and opportunity moving forward.
Yeah, I think besides the great numbers that we're facing, attracting that talent to our industry is harder than it's ever been before. The skills are applicable across the Googles and the Amazons. So as we start to pick up momentum and as we start to produce hardware, people can't help but get excited and be inspired. I don't know about you guys, but I get way more excited about a jet than I do the watch that I have on, right? And it used to be that people were inspired by that. We don't do enough to get that hardware out to the field fast enough so that people are excited about it. So that'll help as we gain momentum. It's going to help our cause even more to get people into the industry.
If I can add one other thought, this is the way I think about the role of the Air Force Research Laboratory and many of the folks that we work with across our joint partners. We're in an ecosystem, and that ecosystem has natural connections with a whole bunch of partnerships. What Dr. Roper is challenging us to do, and a number of other folks are saying, you know what, we need to expand that ecosystem. We need to make sure that we are reaching out and touching industry partners and academics and our allies across the nation to bring that whole of government, if you will, and whole of nation to bear on this problem. What we find regularly is that it's not so much that folks don't want to work with us, it's that they really don't know how and they're not engaged, and so we need to reach out a hand and introduce them and make it easier to bring them into our ecosystem so that they can be players. Because by and large, most industry and academics around the country want to do that. They understand the importance of the mission that we're doing. We just got to make it easier to pull them into our ecosystem.
And just in case you think this isn't the most important thing we're talking about, I think there's an untapped resource that I think is easier to get to than we're giving any credit, is women and minorities. I mean, you look at the number of engineers that we hire and the number of women that come into aerospace and defense is lower than it's ever been. We're missing half of the workforce. And so what do we need to change? How do we need to represent? Where do we need to go in that supply where young women decide, you know what, I think I want to go to the moon. I want to go design that thing. We're missing that whole thing. And as a company, Lockheed, we're kind of bit scratching our head, but that's an area I think it's right in front of us. How do we take advantage of that so we have more men and women, more diversity of thought? That's what makes you innovate, when you're challenged by someone else thinking about it differently.
I'll pile on to that just a moment, because this is a really important issue and something that we've been working at for a number of years, and it's really hard to break. And so what we've kind of decided is, if you start to try and recruit folks once they're in college, there's a lot of industry. There's a lot of players who want to recruit that talent because they recognize the importance of diversity. We all get that. So one of the things that we're doing with the authorities and ability that we have to nurture a STEM workforce is start young and engage them when they're all the way into grade school and middle school and high school, so that they understand, hey, there are exciting things to do within the defense ecosystem, and give them a path so that when they come out and graduate, then we have some of the broader diversity of thought and of personality that we really need to benefit from the well-known benefits of a diverse workforce.
Cool. Question from the audience here. What are some of the different concerns or factors when considering the speed versus risk on acquiring products between the different domains of aerospace and cyber?
Well, I think we're risk averse, typically. And we need to take more calculated risks. Dr. Roper talked before about model-based systems engineering. So we are using that. We're deploying that on a number of our platforms where that's going to allow us to take risk. As we go into flight tests, we're going to be validating models, not just so much punching holes into the sky. But, if we take risks, we can move faster. Got to be calculated across the domain. But that's, as a nation, I think that's what we need to move towards. Shared risk, what's acceptable to allow us to go fast, and where is the risk really low, that we can just change the process that sometimes is slow, both in industry and in government. But I think our tolerance at the moment, or in the past, still a little bit today, we want to defer to being risk adverse. We want to get a couple of different eyes on it, check it, make sure it's perfect. And we've heard today that we need to be able to move fast to get the capability out. So I think it's calculated risk management across all of the domains you mentioned.
Yeah, you want to take that risk early, where the ROI is high, and where the penalty of failure or learning, my words, is minimized, right? And there's an irony that early success, as you lean forward, can sometimes be self-deprecating, because as you are successful, people want more. And you're not necessarily geared for the more. You're not necessarily geared for the sustainment model. So we all have to remember, as we ask our teams to lean forward and they are successful, that then we are patient while everything catches up, because in the long run, it was much quicker to get to that fielded product than it was to take time studying it for 20 years and then find out that you didn't know some things.
With respect to this risk balance trade-off, I can't help but channel my long-term mentor, General Polakowski. I've heard her say this, talk about this many times, that in the 2000s, we went through a time period where we had a lot of challenging programs. We had Nunn-McCurdy issues, and we were under great scrutiny to have time-certain delivery. And so the entire acquisition system sort of changed its emphasis and its metrics and the review processes. It all slowed down, but it came much more time certain and cost certain. And so that was goodness. The problem is that we set the risk rheostat very, very low so that we could have certainty in those programs. We now recognize that that's not going to get us where we need to go. And so we've got to readjust the risk rheostat. And this is more cultural than anything else. To get at that, I'll just give you, in fact, I think what Dr. Roper is doing to recognize risk takers is fantastic. I just 2 days ago had my award ceremony, and I recognized one of the risk takers because I'm trying to do the same thing, get the entire workforce to change that. Let me tell you about just the story, because it's really indicative. So the Rocket Lab folks out at Edwards Air Force Base had on contract a booster for a hypersonic system. And they weren't real thrilled with the performance that the contractor was going to deliver. I won't name any names here on this. And they thought they could do better because they're the experts in this. They've been doing this a long time. So they said, you know what, let's go see if we can go beat that. Let's go build up a rocket and test it. Well, they did that, and guess what? They failed. The thing blew up. Well, it didn't exactly blow up, but it did not act like they were like they had planned. But that's how you learn, and at a very low cost. But that's how they learn. This just happened about a month ago, so they're regrouping to decide if they're going to go rebuild. But I love it. I love the competition to keep our industry partners honest, and the willingness to go out and fail. And so we're celebrating those types of failures and risk taking, because that's the kind of behavior and that our workforce and our culture really needs to reset the risk rheostat.
General, can I fill in on that? I'm glad you gave that as an example, because I think from an industry standpoint, we need to see that being recognized and rewarded. At Lockheed Martin, we have this culture philosophy that says the experience we give you modifies the beliefs that you have, so you take the actions that we want to achieve the results that we're all looking for. And to your point, our experience was failure was not an option. If you failed, you're going to get the program canceled. And so hence the ship turned and reacted to that experience. I think the more experience that we have as an industry that says we're going to make a calculated risk, this may not go as we planned, we think it's going to accelerate our learning, let's go do this, and it doesn't go, we don't get a program canceled, they say, okay, this is working, right? It's that team sport that as we walk together, giving that, the more we get that experience, I think industry will open up and be more willing to take that risk.
Building off that point, we've got a question from the audience. It's really for the industry members. What can the government do to help build more trust, whether it be taking more risk or pushing out in areas where they see capability gaps and optimal ways to fill those? How can government do a better job there?
Well, I'll just say that I think Jeff just hit on it, right? And that is that you can be a partner, and that we can build trust together. I inherently believe that we all, and especially us in this industry, get up every day trying to do the right thing. We didn't go to work to try to blow up a motor. We made some decisions, we leaned forward, and it happened, right? We continue to reward that behavior. We continue to build the trust, and I sort of tend to oversimplify things, and I have a couple of great German shepherds, you know, and you only got to whack them on the head once before they come to you with their head down. We've got to be very careful about how we reprimand, if ever, if people are trying to do the right thing. So to me, it's about trust and partnership at every level, right? Throughout the acquisition phase, at the leadership level, that we're all sending the same message to the workforce who are asking to modify their behavior, and trust that if they do, we have their back.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. So I talked about transparency before. That's what it comes down to. If industry and government can be transparent, listen to each other, monitor, and have a conversation around where risks are, what those risks really are, how we work it together, pragmatism. Acquisition is tough. Development programs are tough. On TX, I'm really proud of the way that we have partnered with the Air Force. And the Air Force is a large structure. From the SPO to the Air Force Test Center, to the ENEZ team at Wright Pat, how do we build that trust together? Because you've got to earn it at the end of the day. And you're only as good as you were the last time you delivered something. So I think having that level of confidence, pragmatism, sharing will develop that trust. And we shouldn't be so down on ourselves. I mean, we do some incredible things. And we do things that other people can't do. We just need to do it faster and cheaper. Faster and cheaper.
Yeah, Doug, I think following up on Kevin, your culture comment, Kelly Johnson had it right 75 years ago. Many know his 14 rules. And one of the main, when I look at the 14 rules today and put them in a more modern context, it's about small empowered teams. Trying to keep the access to the program as small as possible. And I think that's why big programs get challenged, because the more people that are involved, the more bureaucracy, the more, would the secretary say, we're spending time on stupid things. It generates its own bureaucracy. And so the smaller we can keep the teams, I think our experience would be that way. Even when I look through my Skunk Works portfolio right now, the ones that are doing really well have the smallest program teams, the fewest engineers. They're moving with speed, and they can make decisions because they're given the resources they need and they're empowered to do that. But even within that, we have other programs that are much larger, and they struggle to get through basic decisions because of that, I think, wasting time on things that's not value added. So that's a culture. It's the 14 rules, but it's really the people, the men and women that we put in these jobs and give them the responsibility to execute.
Don't disagree at all. However, the other side of the coin is too oftentimes in these small pockets of teams that are doing activities, I find that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and they should, right? And they could benefit from one another, and that becomes a challenge. So I don't disagree that you got to empower those small teams go, but one of the challenges that I see, and this is across, that big whole of nation. Turns out it's a big nation. There's lots of. I'm working almost daily with my Navy and Army counterparts to try and ensure that we are leveraging where it makes sense to leverage and being, not duplicating. So that's the flip side of the coin, if you will, is getting some mechanism by which people have an understanding of who's doing what so that we can benefit from that. And that's part of that partnership.
Yeah, look what the chief and the secretary have been spending lots of time talking about over the last couple of years about this empowerment piece. The chief holds a wing commander conference every year. He would say it's probably the most impactful conference that he has. He brings in all the wing commanders, and his basic message is this: I trust you. I have your back. Go long. Don't wait for me or the secretary. Right? You're all at the point of impact. You're the ones that are seeing the issues. Move out. I trust you. It's powerful. Every place I go, that message comes back to me about thank you, that the chief has our back, that we get it, we're moving out, we're not waiting, we can make a difference. So it's whether it's a program office, whether it's at the squadron level, that message is resonate from the chief.
Well, sometimes you're better lucky than good, and we're at our time, and that was quite a message to wrap with. I want to thank all of you for participating today. Thank all of you for attending. We're going to have a break now in the exhibit hall, and so please be in your seats at 3:15. And then also membership reminder, the FA booth is out there as well. And for members from Virginia AFA, after the Spark Tank competition, if you could meet out by the stairs out there, there's going to be a photograph for that group. So with that, thank you very much.